Madam Chair, we are live.
Thank you, Mr. Moya. Hello, everyone. We'll call to order this meeting of the Intergovernmental Legislative Relations Committee. We have a nice short agenda today. Our first item is, let me just take a look. It looks like everyone is present except possibly Councillor Pena.
Yes, my apologies, Madam Chair. She had a situation come up about 15 minutes before the meeting, has to be excused, if that's all right.
Oh, yes, of course, no problem. So we will let the record reflect that Councillor Pena is excused. Our first item on the agenda is review for recommendation, the 22 state legislative priorities resolution and attachments. And if we could start with a little background from Mr. Minicucci.
Madam President, members of the IGR committee, just a quick little background. As you know, back in August, the U.S. committee members asked that we get it going a little bit earlier this year so that we have a packet in place that you could begin, particularly Isaac and the team he has and Joe can go out and start advocating a little bit earlier with the legislators with a little bit more organized packet. How that went was fairly well. It took a little bit longer than we thought because some of the counselors, they kind of assemble their package later as what their priorities are as they kind of try to fit into place other funding sources and make decisions on which projects they want to go forward and not. But everybody did kind of hurry up their system. They were great about it. Our last one came in, I believe, last Tuesday. They were able to pull it together, and that was District 2 for Councillor Benton. Regarding it, what we do usually is in the last couple of sessions, what we've done is we kind of get regarding the district priorities, and I'll start with those first. We kind of get the bigger list. We ask the counselors to keep it kind of within, just their main priorities. And then we bring a larger list to the committee. And then it's kind of the committee's call each year. The committee kind of makes a decision whether or not they call that list and ask the counselors to go back and just pick their top 2 priorities, kind of like as what you all did last year, or whether you want to go with the full list. So basically the comparison is, for instance, last year, you had 16 priorities on the district list, district neighborhood list. This year at this time, we have 67. And some of that was from the counselors and some of that was from came from the administration, also helped out with district projects, working from what they knew, working with the counselors. So, and again, I should point out that projects kind of vary. So for instance, I guess, some community, I think when I look at it, District 5, and I believe Districts 5, Districts 5, 3, and 2 have the most. They have 14, 12, and 14. Some of those were, and the District 1 has 11. Some of those were brought on by the counselors and some were brought on by the administration. Now, and then of course, Districts 4 and 8 and 2 have very few. They have 4, I think 6, 7, and 8 have 4 each. And District 4 and 9 have 2 each. Or I'm sorry, Districts 6, 7, and 9 have 4 each, and Districts 4 and 8 have 2 each. Now, again, I should point out, for instance, in the case of Councillor, your matter, Councillor Bassan, in your case, you have 2, although one of them, as you know, you focused it on a major investment. Whereas I think some of the districts have a lot, they have more, but they're smaller projects, whether or not they're priorities. So that's kind of how it breaks out now. I can give you a quick breakdown. District 1, 11, District 2, 14, District 3, 12, District 4, 2, District 5, 14, District 6, 4, District 7, 4, District 8, 4, and District 9, 2, for a total of 67. As it spreads across the board, that comes out to about 7 to 8 priorities per council district, if you spread it, if you average it out. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Regarding the other 2 attachments, there were some for citywide policy. There is a small list. However, if you look at reading it, the requests are for significant legislative requests on the city, and that would be an agenda. That would be district. That would be number 1, attachment 1. Julian, if you could put that up real quick. One on there, I would just mention that since Councillor Pena is not here, but I think she wanted to point out, was that for the one where it says remove marijuana public safety employment exclusions, she realizes that the common term now is cannabis, but I think she wanted to go ahead and ask the city to use the word marijuana simply because I think her feeling was that when it was an illegal use and considered illegal and immoral to use marijuana, the Hispanic word or the Spanish language version was used. When it goes to being legal, she says it goes more towards the the Greek scientific or Latin scientific term, which is more actually used by English. So her feeling is that she wanted just to say that little difference, that it kind of, she wanted to point out that she didn't want her feeling was, I think, that the Spanish language then was kind of being framed to look a little bit like it, to kind of be tied in with when it was considered illegal or immoral. So I think that's why she wanted to change the terminology to marijuana to kind of on that one. I think the rest of them, I think, as you can see though, are just basically are common to what we have each year. And also new this year is the Memorial 2111, which is the recidivism memorial passed by Councilor Benton or Councilor Borrego. And then the city, and then attachment to the citywide projects, those are about consistent with our lengths each year. One thing on the citywide project is that in the citywide projects, the last one has a request to plan, design, and construct a veterinary clinic at the Westside Animal Shelter. There's a near duplicate in the district projects. That one says to plan, design, and construct a complete rebuild, basically, of the Westside Shelter. So we kind of kept them separate since they both kind of have different goals that can go different ways on that one. And we also didn't know if the administration at this time felt that we do know there's a critical need for veterinary clinic if they wanted to tie the veterinary clinic in with a full rebuild or not. So that's basically our report on how it is. The other final thing I would say is just, I guess, forewarning, is that since we do have 4 new counselors coming in, there is a possibility some of them may ask to have an amendment to the bill once they're here, a last minute amendment for legislature starts, if they have some change to priorities. We don't know if that will occur or not. So, and that is my report, and I'll stand for any questions or if the committee would like to proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Menicucci. Certainly we'll open this up for discussion, but I think first I'd like to hear from Mr. Thompson on whether you recommend a specific strategy about, the 62 or the 16, or, if it makes sense to narrow it down, and then I'm inclined to let our counselors make that decision since it's their bill. But any advice for us on that, Joe?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam President, and everyone. It's nice to see everybody. The Legislative Finance Committee is meeting this week, and just the other day, David Abbey announced that the severance tax bonding capacity for this coming year was approximately $500 million. So if you take the statutory monies off the top and you divide it by chamber and executive, you're talking about maybe just over $3 million discretionary capital for your average senator and just over $2 million for your average House member. And when you look at our target of that 30 legislators or so, that's sort of the zone. In general, I think having fewer projects is better with legislators because they definitely have an appetite to complete projects that are larger and might have more impact on the community. Now, that being said, I've also seen some folks take decidedly smaller projects that are more neighborhood related, but for smaller amounts and be successful. So I think both can work, but I do think that with last year's transparency rules, we all need to be very mindful that every single penny a legislator spends is going to be reported. So we need to make sure that our projects are, on their face, they have a lot of merit.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. So as Mr. Menicucci advised us, I think last year council decided to sort of go back and try to get folks to narrow down their lists. And I want to say the year before we didn't do that. I feel like one year we just kind of let it rip, and then another year we let them narrow it down. And would invite our counselors to talk about what your preference is.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I can see both sides of it. If there's not one large project in a particular district and there are several smaller projects with needs, then I can understand why that counselor would be choosing to add on multiple things in, when you're saying, oh, well, hoping to get, let's say, $1 million. Well, $1 million of lots of small things or $1 million for one big thing. I mean, I can understand that. However, I personally am the district listed that has 2. So I can also agree with the fact that I think that it's easier to communicate So as far as our city lobbyist, whether that be Mr. Thompson or whether that be Mr. Padilla or Ms. Anaya, anybody going up to Santa Fe, my personal concept at this point is that the more streamlined we can make it, the stronger the potential.
Thank you, Counselor Vasan. And I think it would be sort of you and the other two counselors who would have to, and of course, Mr. Minicucci, who would have to herd those cats in terms of narrowing down projects. So that's why I feel we should be deferential to you, but certainly Mr. Padilla or Mr. Pulley, if you'd like to add, anybody would like to add to this conversation, please.
Well, and Madam Chair, on that, Mr. Minicucci, I'm happy to discuss this further with you if you want, so that we can decide if this is something, if herding these cats is worth it or even achievable or not, given the scope of their projects and their desire. I think that it depends.
So, Madam Chair, I apologize for interrupting, Councilor Vasan. I didn't let you finish. Go ahead. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I think that it would be great to just have the inside communication so that we can figure out if it's feasible to minimize and kind of, refocus and reprioritize some of them. But at the same time, if the counselors are not going to be willing to do that, then we get what we get in certain ways.
So yes, Councilor Vasan, Madam Chair, Councilor Vasan, members of the committee, historically how we do it is that we ask that the committee set a limit. So in other words, as with staff, then we go back to the counselors and say that the committee has given, because the committee is authorized under ordinance to prepare the program, because you have that authority under ordinance. And so basically using the authority of the committee, we go back and say the committee has set a limit per district of X. We do, of course, I think the committee has always set a uniform number per district. And then once you set that, then we go back to counselors and say, the committee's asked that you just pare down your list to X number of projects. If you give us your top X number of projects, and that's how that goes. So that's a matter. We send out that email on that one. And so that's not too hard to herd. We just make the phone calls and stay with them, and usually it's possible. But thank you.
Yes. So Mr. Padilla, I see you came on here. Would you like to pipe in here?
No, I think it would be helpful to actually pare it down a little bit. I don't want to anger any of the counselors, but it is easier when we're up in Santa Fe to be able to focus on a certain number of projects.
Thank you. And Counselor Sena, anything to add there? I see it came on video.
Yes, thank you. I think as one of the counselors that has a little bit more than two, I can only speak for myself. I think it is good to narrow down some to what number. I think originally the discussion was to actually have a couple as a priority. And then when we were having the discussion, we saw other counselors that had a lot more. So then we're like, okay, well, then we'll add some, and then we'll put our top at the top, and then, kind of our wish list at the bottom. So I think it's possible to narrow it down. And kind of in speaking with some of our legislators already, I think that they're saying, look, this is what the plan is, generally what the funds are available. So we have already kind of laid it out as well. Like what was stated by Mr. Minicucci, some of the projects are already on the administration side through the mayor's list as well. So, I think we're already having a few on both. So I think it can be narrowed down. I think now it's just what would that number be between 2, 11, and I forget what the other higher numbers are. What would be a good number to kind of just say, is it 5 as our top priorities, and then go from there.
Thank you, Counselor Sena. And just to add to the mix here, the Supreme Court did today decide that the legislators get to dole out the ARPA money. So I don't know what that means for you fellas up there, but it should make this whole conversation more interesting. So, I mean, I guess maybe just procedurally, would we need to have maybe a motion to approve the form of resolution subject to counselors narrowing it down to X number of projects?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes, Madam Chair. And if possible, again, this is totally on bequest by the staff's own self-interest. If it's possible for the committee to choose that number.
Yes.
that they feel would be good. I mean, I think that will make it a little bit faster if that way we can. And I think the numbers you got, since there is more this year, I think Councilor Sena indicated a decent number. You had 2 last year, you have a little bit more money this year, and you may have the ARPA money, so you may want to double it to 4 or something like that, assuming something like that, that would be where we could say it worked well last year, plus we have, additional money in the pot from the original sources, the oil severance money, and we have potentially the ARPA money. So that might be one way we could explain to the counselors what that number is 4.
Thank you, Mr. Minicucci. Councilor Bassan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious Mr. Thompson, what's the magic number you would recommend if you were to pick one?
I think that in that 4 or fewer would be great. I think that would be fine, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Well, I would entertain a motion if someone would like to make it.
I'll make a motion to, however we need to word all of that, to say that we need to have no more than 4 priorities per council district for the upcoming session.
And other than that, are you willing to then also just move that we go ahead and approve the resolution generally with
Yes.
that caveat?
I would, so moved.
Thank you, Councilor Bassan. I hear a motion from Councilor Bassan and a second from Councilor Sena. Any further discussion, comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, I think we need someone to call the roll. We haven't done a lot of votes in this committee, but I believe that's how we do it. Would that be you, Mr. Minicucci?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am,
Thank
Chair.
you.
So we'll start with Councilor Bassan,
Yes.
Councilor Sena,
Yes.
Mr. Padilla,
Yes.
Mr. Pooley,
Yes.
Madam Chair, CAO Nair.
Yes. All right, that sounds like that was unanimous. Thank you. All right, moving on, we have other business, but since we do have our lobbyist here, I would invite a report from Mr. Jaramillo, if you had anything you wanted to share.
Thank you, Madam President, and members of the committee and counselors. We're continuing to work with Ms. Bachicha and others on the drafting and initiation of the VIP funding bill, of course, still a top priority. Also continuing to work, hopefully as we get closer with different members of both chambers on different crime packages that are going to be introduced, specifically reduction of gun violence, and also continuing to evaluate different mental health related bills that will make the call. Certainly there will be lots of gun violence reduction bills or bills aimed at that, and of course lots of bills to address crime in general. And so those are things that we're watching and keeping an eye on as they come into focus as we get closer. I have a call into the DOH policy advisor because there is a bill regarding some prescription drugs and illicit drugs that are been introduced in the past. And I know the city is very interested in that because it's a very important issue in our community. And so working with the Drug Policy Alliance and other stakeholders on that as well. So I think things will start moving pretty quickly. And, we're, I guess, is it T-minus 60 days? Joe keeps a better clock than I do, but certainly we're within 60 days of the session and it'll be upon us quickly, in 30 days, a fast and furious session. So we're getting, as my dad would say, we're getting our ducks in a row.
Thank you, Mr. Jaramillo. Any questions for Dave? Okay, Mr. Thompson, anything you wanted to update us on?
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate you raising the lawsuit, the Supreme Court decision today, because I think that is a huge backdrop issue for us to be paying attention to. I think that all of this has affected the administration's interaction with the legislature in terms of messaging on bills to make them germane to the business of the 30-day session. I still think it's going to be very tight on them providing information on the bills they're going to provide messages on. But as we get closer to the session, I think we'll start to see some of that free up. And then we'll be reporting everything we're hearing back to you all so that you can make informed choices about things you want to do. I also believe that as the Legislative Finance Committee produces a framework for how the ARPA, how they envision some of the ARPA monies coming out, that may create some additional opportunities for us. So we'll be paying close attention to that. And as you saw yesterday in the paper, or perhaps you saw in the paper about the GRT reduction that they're contemplating, that was fronted by the legislature, but has been endorsed by the administration. And I think that that is distinguishable from the GRT legislation we saw in the past, where they had to create a hold harmless for local governments. But those are the types of bills that we have to pay very close attention to, because you never know, one little change in it could materially impact us. So we're definitely tuned into what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions for Mr. Thompson? Okay, any other business before this committee? Mr. Minicucci?
Yeah, just two quick little reports regarding, you also asked that we, Madam Chair, that we work on the committee had asked on the federal priorities bill. We did send out a request to the counselors. And I think particularly in Councilor Senna's case, I believe she provided us her priorities, I believe. But I think most of the counselors kind of felt like they wanted to see how the infrastructure bill came out, was part of it. And plus they wanted to kind of work through and get this state bill through. So with that done now, and we're beginning to get, from Mr. O'Donnell's office, some of the programs that will be available under the infrastructure bill, plus the report that came from Representative Stansberry's office. I think we have a little bit more knowledge. So once we complete this bill, we'll be reaching out a second time to the counselors. We hope to either get it to you in December. We hope to get something to you in December, but it may not be till early January, because again, we have 4 new counselors coming in. So that might be practical, that one. And we don't really have as much of a deadline on the federal bill. That's the issue with the federal bill. One other issue is that came up yesterday, is not an issue, but an opportunity. The Mid-Region Council of Governments contacted us or contacted my email. They said that they identified, looking at their membership rosters, and that they are an intergovernmental committee, or their membership rosters, that we actually, right now, we have the mayor on the MTB and the board, or at least the MTB, Metropolitan Transportation Board, and 6 counselors, or 6 counselors. Actually, they looked at it and they said, we actually have now 7 positions. So they're verifying that. So that'll be 1 more position. We have to make a decision. Do we want to put another counselor on, the city does, or do they want to put the CAO on? I mean, either one would qualify. So I can't think of any mechanism. It's been a long time since we had to do it. The only instrument I can think of is this body, because it does deal with intergovernmental relations, and the COG is a subdivision of the state. It is the Region 3 planning organization under the state government. So that might be something we might be coming back to you. If you all agree, we can bring back to you in the next meeting if we verify that additional position is available.
Thank you, Mr. Minicucci. And I love a good meeting as much as the next person, but maybe just a second mayor designee as opposed to a particular position might be good. Okay, well, that's all great. So it sounds like we will need to meet in December, and probably I would ask our teams to also work together to just go ahead and get the during session meetings on the calendar. With all our calendars being as hectic as they are, might be good to have those markers in there. And I know we meet every other week when there's a 60-day, and that's maybe we just meet the last 2 weeks or something when there's a 30-day, but I'll let Mr. Minicucci, Mr. Padilla figure that out and work with our lobbyists to get those calendared. Anything else, folks? Okay, seeing no further business, we can adjourn. Everybody have a good day. Be safe. Thank you.
Good holiday.